Today we're talking about 3 lot selection mistakes that I've seen cost homeowners tens of thousands of dollars. And I thought about this because I recently toured 2 identical properties. They were the same floor plan in the same neighborhood. So in the perfect world, they should have been asking the same amount of money. But one of them was actually sitting on the market even though it was $50,000 cheaper. And the big difference, you guessed it, was the lot. In today's video, I want to break down these types of lots that could cost you tens of thousands down the road. So the first mistake that most buyers might not even think about is buying on a mixed density street. In a newer community, you're going to have mixed density. And what I mean by that is high density is, think about townhouses, apartments. Lower density would be single detached homes and semi-detached. So here's where a lot of buyers slip up. They choose a single family home and they don't take into consideration what's in front of them. For example, if there were townhomes or apartments in front on that same street, the reason why this is a negative thing is if there's a higher density plot of land in front of you, typically it leads to higher traffic. You might have more cars parked on the streets. And usually that's not attractive. First of all, while you're living there, because then you and your guests will have to drive around to find parking. But the buyer in the future, when they're driving up to your home and thinking about can they see themselves living there, if they can't find parking to walk in and do their showing, or it's difficult, that's definitely going to be something that's going to knock off points for why they should buy your home, or maybe even knock off the price. So something to think about. Here's something interesting is that the opposite is actually a positive. If you're buying a high density home, so townhouse or apartment, and you land on a street that's a lower density, like single family or duplexes in front of you, that's actually a good thing. So an opportunity to look for if you're buying high density and a caution if you're buying low density. So I visited a homeowner recently that wanted to sell their home and they kept on hyping up their view. So their house sat on top of a hill. The backyard sloped downwards towards rolling hills. And they were right, the view was amazing. But one thing I think they forgot or even tuned out was how much road noise was coming from the highway in between the sloping backyard and the rolling hills. I let them know that it was gonna be an obstacle, but they kept on saying this was a selling feature, this was a selling feature. The moment we went on the market, pretty much exactly what I thought, every single buyer, the moment they stepped out onto that backyard, complained about how much road noise was there. They loved the interior, they loved the floor plan, everything about the home they would have bought, but that highway noise was just a deal breaker that they couldn't make any sort of offer. Even a ridiculous offer was something they wouldn't even consider. They wouldn't even lowball us. So to sell the home, we had to do multiple price drops and it took longer than we expected. It actually sat on the market. I think a lot of buyers underestimate how much distance you need to be from a highway to eliminate the road noise. So the way that their house was set up, again, on a hill, sloping backyard, and there was still a good amount of green space before the highway. And there's a lot of noise that still traveled. Because it's hard to judge how much noise is going to be traveling into your home, my best advice would be to just avoid homes that back onto roads, especially busy roads, altogether, because this is something that could definitely be a problem when you go and sell your home down the road. And last, back to that story that I was talking about where there was 2 identical homes, but one of them was $50,000 less and it still sat on the market. And here's what happened. So I had buyers that saw the photos online and they loved the floor plan, they loved the finishings and colors, and all that was left before they pulled the trigger to make an offer was just to really look at it in person and make sure that they loved it. When we got to the property and opened the living room blinds, that's when we saw what the deal breaker for that specific lot was. See, the photographer closed the blinds on purpose in the photos, and the reason they did that was the backyard was overlooked by a 4-story apartment building, which cast a huge shadow onto that property. And the shadow is probably like the least of the worries because people on the higher floors of that apartment building could look down into the bedrooms. And I'm pretty sure like the vast majority of people, unless you're into it, they don't want people looking into their bedrooms. Remember when I was talking about that mixed mixing density, this was that mistake to the max. This isn't just having an apartment building behind you or a townhouse that's a 3-story. It's not just that. You also have to think about, what if your home was on a hill, at the bottom of the hill, okay, 2-story home, bottom of the hill. Up the hill, you've got a 2-story property. I've seen this setup commonly in newer communities where that property looks down on that home. So something to think about, just because you've got a single family home backing onto a single family home, there might be a hill there. So that's something that you should take a look at on the elevation map, or just walk the lot and take a look at the dirt. It'll be really obvious that there's a hill there. So here's the tricky part. Sometimes these bad lots, usually they're priced maybe $15,000, $20,000 less than the lots that you should be buying. And that's probably a red flag right away. When we go to resell, it's not just a minus $15,000, minus $20,000 problem that I've had to deal with on the resale side. In this story, it's $50,000. So just be aware, just because you're getting a good deal on a lot, do your homework and make sure that it doesn't have any of these red flags above.